So before going on to make the more powerful driver for the primary coil, I thought I would do something about the base that the coil is standing on. I wanted to make it electrically conductive so I could ground it. So I was originally going to cover it in some more of the 2-inch aluminum tape, and I thought of a better solution. So I got some Reynolds wrap and some Elmer's spray glue, and I glued this aluminum wrap to the wood. All I've got left over to do now is smooth the edges over, and probably will put some of the aluminum tape on there just to protect them. So in a moment of insanity, I decided to spray the edges with some of the Elmer's glue and roll the aluminum foil over before trying to tape it. And now I'm sticking to everything that I touch with my fingers, so I don't know that I recommend that. But I am going to put a little bit more aluminum tape over the side, and then I'm going to stick a bolt through that I can attach a ground wire to. So I also stuck some little sticky feet on the bottom. These are actually bump stops for cabinet doors, I think, that I got at the hardware store. And I drilled a hole through there that I can put a bolt through, as you'll see in a minute, and grabbed a little piece of wire and put a crimp terminal on the end. And I didn't have any eyes that were 1/4 inch, which is the bolt size, so I just snipped the end and widened it out with some pliers. And I'll put that on, you can see what it looks like in a second. So I didn't have the bolt the right length for this, so I just put a 5/16 nut on the bolt to act as a spacer and clamped my little ground wire down. And on the outside we got a couple of nuts there, which you'll see later on when we wire things up. We're going to put a ground wire on there so that this whole platform is grounded. So that's what the platform looks like now before I put the PVC fittings back on the top. And then the next step is to make the primary coil. So the next thing I want to build is a better primary coil that's going to sit on top of this table. And we need to raise it up a little bit so it'll be up near where the secondary coil starts at the top of that plastic connector. And there's two styles of coils we can do. We can do a flat one. And I happen to have this bottom of a plastic bucket, which I think might be a good insulator to mount the wire on. And then I might try doing a helical one made from this cup with the bottom cut off it. And I'm going to use some, this is 14 gauge household wiring that you might find in the wall of your house. So we can do one coil on this insulator that stands like this, a little bit better than that, but something like 10 turns maybe. And then we're going to take a similar piece of wire and put a coil, but that is a flat spiral, on this plastic bucket. And then we can try the two different designs of coils to see which ones we like the best. So for the flat coil, I marked out about 10 turns in a spiral pattern and drilled some holes in this plastic disc. And the big hole in the middle is just big enough for the PVC tube to go over, so we can mount it on the base. So that's roughly what it's going to look like when it's mounted on the base. And the biggest thing is going to be seeing if we can get the wire to go down flat. So for the cup, again I marked, so to drill the spiral on the cup that I'd cut the bottom off of, again I marked the dot pattern on the cup first, and then put a couple of wood supports up here just so it's easier to hold the thing up in the air while I drill the holes. So that's roughly what the spiral on the cup is going to look like before we put the wire on there. I thought it was going to be pretty hard to keep the wires from touching if I use the bare copper wire on this flat layout. I plan to put little cable ties through all the holes, but unless I want to drill millions more holes, it's going to be pretty hard to keep the copper wire perfectly aligned. So I've decided I'm going to use insulated 14 gauge wire, since I happen to have some of that lying around, and I'll just strip the ends off. What I really wanted to do with the bare wire was be able to put taps on the primary. What I really wanted to do with the bare wire was put taps on the primary at different places. So what I'll have to do is strip some of the insulation off after the fact, which will be a bit of a nuisance, but I think easier than trying to do this with uninsulated wire. So this is what it looks like after I put a couple of turns on, just to see how it would go down. It's a little tedious bending the wire and then putting the cable ties in, but I think it's going to work. And then at some point I'll scrape off some plastic from the copper so that I can put some tap connections on there for the primary, and we'll see how it goes. So that's the finished flat coil, and it's got 8 turns on it, and it actually came out quite nicely. I think what I'll do is hook it up to the original Slayer circuit and just see how that works at all before I start trying to make some taps at different numbers of turns. And also I'm going to work on doing the more cylindrical coil on the plastic cup former. Same kind of idea, and we'll just see how that comes out. Then we can try the two of them, see which one works best. Well, I was just getting ready to put the wire on the sawn off cup here, and I realized that I've drilled despite where the arrow is now, I had the arrow facing the other way, and unfortunately that's not the way around I want the wire to go. It needs to be in the opposite phase to the secondary coil, which goes to the right as we're looking at it here. And so I drilled the side holes in the wrong places, but the front and back holes are still offset by basically half a centimetre. So if I only put clips in those two, it should still be okay. We'll give it a go. So I decided to use up the bare copper wire that I had, which, as you can see, got me about halfway. And then I thought I might as well finish the job that way, so I took a length of the 14 gauge green ground wire that I've got here and pulled the insulation off it, and then soldered the two together here so I can keep going. So I'm going to finish this up and then maybe put some more wire ties in the quarter-way round marks, but actually it's looking pretty good without them right now. So there's the conical coil and its lovely pink cup sitting on the base, and despite only having a cable tie every 180 degrees, seems to be pretty much just fine. So I think the next phase of the plan is to wire this up to the second Slayer circuit with the big bipolar transistor in it and see what happens. Right then, well, I'm going to try my two new primary circuits today, but before doing that I've wired up the original little circuit that we had at the bottom. They're just 4 turns of wire, and I've cut the power supply down to 20 volts with a 2 amp current limit while I do the testing on the new coils. I don't want to fry anything too soon. So we turn this on, you can see that it lights my lightsaber up nicely. I can hear some nice frying sounds somewhere. I think they're coming out of my power supply. Now I do have this connected to ground actually through the power system today, so, and the box of this power supply is also grounded, and as you can see we're taking about 30 watts from the power supply, and it lights this tube up very nicely. This is a 35 watt tube, I think. No, it's a 20 watt tube. Oh, we can see some nice little waves running up the tube there. Anyway, so this is the original circuit, and I want to take a look at something before we move on. So the thing to take note of here, before we change the primary circuit, is that this secondary coil is wound going around this way. The wire goes round counterclockwise up towards the top, and so does this primary circuit. If we start with where the red clip is, it goes around the same way. So when I wound these, this is my drink cup, the bottom cut off, I actually wound these the other way around. So, yes, be quiet. My meter that I'm using to measure temperature gets bored if you don't talk to it occasionally. So I'm going to have to put the red clip on the top and the blue clip on the bottom on this one, and so that we get the right phase sense in between the primary and the secondary. Anyway, I'm going to wire this one up and see what happens. So we'll start out with the red one on the bottom here, and we'll go up 1, 2, 3, 4 turns, and hang that one on, and we'll just see if it oscillates. I'll turn the lights out if it actually looks like it's working. I'm not seeing any green light there. I don't see any evidence of it oscillating there. So let's turn the clips around the other way. One, two, three, four. These are really not very good clips, but they'll do for this. Well, I can hear it making frying noises. But I'm not seeing anything much going on there. Needs to be up a bit higher, I think. Came on briefly there. Yeah, the coupling's probably not very good with the coil when it's down lower. At this point, I don't have any idea how many turns is going to be optimal for this. I just picked 4 turns because that's what we had on there. 4. Well, let's put the whole thing on there. Well, that's obviously effective. I can hear frying over here. That's always a good sign. Let's turn the lights off. So we're taking about 14 watts out of the power supply. It's current limited at the moment, but obviously it works. The question is, what happens if we turn the current limit up? Alright, we're still 10 amps now, and I can see that the temperature back here has gone up a few degrees, but it's not too bad. So we're only taking about an amp or so at 20 volts, so we can probably go up a little bit more. But it lights the tube up very nicely. Let's turn the voltage up to its max. I also have a ground wire with a little probe on the end. close the door so we can see that better. We get quite nice flames out the end of this. Just to see what that does. Oh, ow! Okay, that makes a big difference. It got really hot very quickly. And I'm at a bit of a loss to explain that because this is grounded. Wow. Yes, Nigel, let's try that again, shall we? Oh, I don't know if I want to. Don't be a baby. Holy shit. Alright, well, clearly, oh man, we are doing about 90 watts and it'll light the tube up quite a long way away apparently. So this arrangement here with a flat primary coil is pretty common in Tesla designs, in the big high voltage ones, and usually this is made out of something like 1/4 inch water line that you'd use on the back of a refrigerator. But in this case it's some 14 gauge ground wire that I've got in there. So we'll try this one out. Oh, well, there you go, it lights up. Not seeing very much with this coil. I think basically it just doesn't couple to the secondary very well, and I don't have a way to lift it up unfortunately because the diameter of the hole I cut is a bit too small to let it slide over the secondary. Yeah, so not too excited about that. I think we'll go back to the drinking cup coil. So a moment of inspiration, I realised that I don't have a decoupling capacitor on the DC supply into the little prototype board, so I've added one and it stopped my power supply making frying noises, which I think is a big plus. And now we've got plasma just leaking out all by itself on the fluorescent light tube. You can't see because I've got the camera zoomed in, but the fluorescent light tube is just lying on the table. It's just come on all by itself. It just comes on all by itself. This one comes on if I hold it anywhere near the tube, anywhere near the coil. This one comes on. Let me take the little copper wire off the top. Is that hot? Nope. But I'm not touching the end of this tube now, it's just there's enough field density across this to light it up. I'm also not wearing my polar wristwatch today. I thought that would be tempting fate a bit too much with the watch. And it looks like we're up to 62 degrees C on the heatsink. But we can definitely do cool things with the fluorescent lights. What we really want though is more power. Now we're running on 4 taps on the primary at about 110 watts on the power supply. So just out of interest I turned the cup upside down. I thought maybe having a narrower diameter at the top might help. So that's 4 turns, which is the same as I've been running on this little thing here. Let's take it down to 3 on the primary, because it's the ratio of the primary to the secondary that causes the voltage multiplication effect. So I'm going to leave the lights on. I'm just going to turn it on and see how much power this takes. 120 watts now. The fluorescent light doesn't come on just lying there on the bench by itself anymore. Let's go down to 5 turns. No, still got to grab it. So was that just a fluke before? Maybe. No, that seems to be the sweet spot. The tube just came back on again. Can't see it very well, but it's on. So about 4 turns seems to be optimal. So I'm back at 4 turns. Yeah, it seems to be actually quite a good spot. Everything seems to be very exciting right about there. We've got a pretty big discharge at the top. But bring the ground rod up to it. So we're running about 120 watts into the primary. It's up to about 78 degrees C now, the heatsink, so it's doing some work. Well, I think that's that for today. So I like this primary coil made on the plastic beaker. I think that's quite good. I might try making a different one, a bit closer to the secondary coil so we get better coupling. And 4 turns seems to be fairly magic, so that's what we're going to aim for. Next step, I think, is to build a much more powerful driver with MOSFETs in it. And that was the multimeter telling us it's time to go and have a cup of coffee.